The TeachPitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for TeachPitch, a global community of 50,000 subscribers from over 205 countries to date. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, people who've built hospitals, huge non-profit organizations, successful journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That's what we're going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo de Pap and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
This situation that we experienced like a family started when I had a boy. I had a Geronimo, and I realized that something was happening. My father is a medical doctor, and he was the pediatrician of Geronimo, and he cannot at that time find the words to tell me that my baby was not doing well. Little by little, he was losing life. And finally, when he was 10 months old, he passed away. I feel that my life was going to an end.
In this conversation with Rosalia Arteaga, we speak about how she found an endless source of strength in an enormous sadness caused by the death of her son. A source so strong that empowered her to become president of her country, the Republic of Ecuador. We also speak about how suffering through a coup d'etat in the late 90s made her even more resilient, and how writing helped her to overcome it all. Enjoy this interview with Rosalia Arteaga Serrano. A very, very warm welcome to the TeachPitch podcast. I'm so very excited to be here today with an amazing, amazing guest. And, I still can't believe that I'm actually here talking to her because I know she has a very, very busy schedule. She's an absolute hurricane when it comes to activity in making this world, and specifically Latin America, a better place. I feel so blessed and honored to have as our very first guest for this podcast, Rosalia Arteaga Serrano. Rosalia is a former politician, current author, broadcaster, and founder of the Fidal Foundation, which is an organization that strives to provide access to high-quality education for all in Latin America. Rosalia is a former cabinet minister of culture and education and the very first female president and vice president of the Republic of Ecuador, a well-deserved position that unfortunately was not held by Rosalia for too long. But the end of her reign as her country's head of state was most certainly not the end of Rosalia's tireless successful efforts to make a long-lasting, sustainable difference in her country, Latin America, and this world. Rosalia founded and chaired several other organizations and even served as Secretary General of the Amazon Corporation Treaty Organization from 2004 until 2007. And most recently, Rosalia was in the news as she was nominated by the youth-led global political movement Forward as a candidate for the position of Secretary General of the United Nations. Not a light nomination or task, but most certainly one that Rosalia would be able to execute with the utmost rigor, patience, balance, and flair. What I admire most about Rosalia is her resilience. I don't think I know anyone else who has worked as hard as she did and who has the capacity to properly dust herself off when she falls over in the personal as well as in the professional spheres. Rosalia's achievements are textbook beyond excellence, but I can assure you that the setbacks and adversities she encountered are beyond deep as well. I feel blessed to call Rosalia a friend, and I'm genuinely honored that she could make some time available to join us in this interview to talk about her life skills. Rosalia, welcome.
Thank you very much, Aldo, for this warm welcome. I am really touched for all about you say about my work and me. I'm really overwhelmed with this, but thank you a lot for the opportunity to talk about common efforts that we have about education and other issues and other challenges that we have. Thank you very much.
Well, the honor is all mine, Rosalia, I can assure you. And it's such a pleasure to call you a friend, but also to have you around for a podcast like this, because, if anyone's story is worth telling, then I think it's yours, because there's so much to it. And one of the, as I said, I admire your resilience, but you're also so active continuously. I think if we're in contact, then, there's an obvious time difference from the UK to Latin America. But I don't think it matters at which hour I contact you. You always get back to me so quickly, or, the people in your team. So I'm always curious, what time does your day start and at what time does it end? And how much activity do you deploy in 24 hours?
I always feel that I don't have enough time for do what I want to do. And I start very early in the morning and I am working until late. But I don't feel it like a work, because I'm enjoying it so much, like giving a speech, writing, or doing a kind of stuff in my foundation or other organizations, that I feel that switching from one field to other field, it makes me more in the capability to do things, because I switch from one to other. Maybe if I dedicate my whole time to one activity, I will not be so productive like I feel doing that in my everyday life.
Yeah, and talking about your activity, so you do quite a bit, right? So you're involved with Fidal. You have your own TV show in Ecuador. You're an author. We're going to talk about some of your books later on. You're then involved with Forward. And so could you give us an idea of how many subjects are there that you're still working on?
Yeah, I am really losing the number of boards that I am part of, because they grow every day. But of course, I have been in such amazing boards like Encyclopedia Britannica, editorial board, or on also the board of trustees of the Library of Alexandria, and I'm member of the board of Women Political Leaders, another organization from India that is a Women International Club. I'm the chairperson, and I'm part of the board of some universities in Ecuador, like University of Otavalo, that is located in an indigenous population, or another university, a SEC university. I'm involved with Camilo José Cela in Spain, or the University of Miami in the Florida state in the United States. And I'm working with UNIR University, chairing a board of advisors of a foundation. And I am part of some other initiatives like Girandula, that is a group of authors of literature for kids and teenagers. As you said, I am leading a TV show like more than 20 years every week in my country. I'm directly involved with a couple of magazines that we produce in Fidal, Edu News and Verde Ecuador, that are with different publics. And I participate in several organizations with young people, writing some poetry and other things. And of course, I have 7 grandkids and 3 kids, and I'm very happy with that. They are all grown, and the young ones, the grandkids, they are part of the happiness of life.
And, could you give us an idea of what they say when they look at their grandmother?
Many times, weekends are better, of course, because we have more time to spend together, except with my grandkids that live now in Australia, because my brother is a diplomat. Then I cannot see them quite often. But the other 4, I saw them weekly, and I had the opportunity also, and I'm very happy for that. But we saw with my sisters and with my parents every week, maybe sometimes twice or 3 times a week. Then we have a very rich relationship with family and with friends.
Wow. So you just don't sleep, I guess.
I sleep really few hours, and I feel that since time is going so fast, I need to sleep less than in the past. And yes, I get involved in such an amount of initiatives that because I found them interested. But the major interest and the major challenge that I have in life is to get quality education for Ecuador and for Latin America and for other countries, because I found that the only way to get a really good quality of life is with good quality of education. These last months, because of the nomination of Forward for the General Secretary of United Nations, I am dedicating a lot of time to talk with young people from Mexico, Mexican people, or from Argentina, or from India, or Pakistan, or people from different countries in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, and it is fantastic. I think that I get a lot of energy talking with young people, with all the creativeness, with the challenges, with the participation that they are providing, and this is fantastic.
I can imagine. I have lots of questions about Forward and that specific nomination. Well, first of all, congratulations, and I think it's a very well deserved nomination, and I'm very happy that Forward, is working with you for that nomination. What made you to kind of get into this? So could you tell us a little bit how this journey started?
Well, it is amazing because they found me in Instagram, in a social network. And I received many times like people asking me and saying, can we meet? Can we have an interview, a possibility to give a speech for a group? And I said, when they contacted me through Instagram, I said, okay, let's have a meeting. I never imagined that it could involve me in such an amazing situation. They asked me to, and they said, that it's going to be an election this year of General Secretary of the United Nations. And I said no, because I was not paying attention to the election. And they said, yes, it's going to be. And we want to make a disruptive process, and this called my attention, because I feel that we sometimes need to shake institutions, because it was created 76 years ago. It has never been a woman been Secretary General of this organization, this global organization. And they asked me, and I said, but it's a condition. Your nomination has to be validated for votations in the different countries in a platform that they create. I never met them in person. This Forward movement was created by young people, and they have the headquarters in London. And I say, okay, why not? I was feeling it's like an exercise of democracy, and I'm always talking about the values of democracy, and say, why not? Because many times for me it's most important the end of the road. The road is so important, how we can do it. Well, I accepted. They organized it like a kind of votation of civil society, especially young people, and it was amazing because in a weekend they participate 71 countries, and I obtained the results because the nomination procedure of the confirmation was because they asked, you want that Rosalia Arteaga could be the candidate of the civil society for this position, or you don't? And until now astonished because I get the support of 98.3% of this votation, 98.3%. And it's big words. Well, they presented my name to the United Nations. United Nations doesn't answer. My country wanted to present my name to be the candidate in an official way, because the only way until now that you can be a candidate is you have the support of one country at least. And I say to them, thanks, but not. Because I feel the process is so rich with the civil society that I'm sure, of course, that I will not be the General Secretary of United Nations now, this election. I don't think so, because I didn't accept the nomination, the official nomination of my country. And, well, it's like that. I had a support, and I couldn't believe, because someone look at the social networks, I think it was Twitter or Facebook, and I suddenly start to receive the support of most of the people of my country. And for me, it was so fantastic, because they were the Supreme Court of Justice, or members of the Parliament, the Committee of International Affairs of the Parliament, the President of the Republic, the incoming President of the Republic, organizations of young people, organizations of teachers, people of the lawyers of different parts of Ecuador, but also I received the support of the Royal Academy of Doctors of Europe from Spain, or from the Panamazonia in Brazil, from Manaus, or people from Tucumán in Argentina. And I cannot even say all the institutions and personalities that started to give me the support. Members of the press, very important journalists and others decided to put on Twitter or to put in social network their support. And it is great. But it has been a way that I can never forget. And I'm so grateful with life and, of course, with Forward and with the other people that gave me the support that it's only a fantastic way. And I'm so happy to have been in the possibility to do that with young people.
Amazing. It sounds like an amazing story and genuinely a civil movement of something that, a lot of people feel should be disrupted. It should be a transparent process. It's an organization that serves all. It's such an important global organization. So I 100% agree with Forward that could be made more transparent. And it's about time that it's a woman who will be in charge there. So you say not this time around, but I don't know how the election is for 4 years. So are you geared up for the next election then?
Let's see what happens, but it's an open road. And I think in my life, I had the possibility many times to open road. I remember when the President of the Republic asked me to be the Minister of Education in 94. Imagine that.
Yeah. And I definitely think you're leading the way in that respect, Rosalia, just by being who you are and being such an absolute gladiator in whatever you take on. Plowing on. And, I meant every word when I introduced you as someone who's resilient. And that brings me to your challenges, because this podcast is about challenges, and you've very graciously shared with me 3 of the challenges you encountered throughout your career. And the first one is actually a very sad one and one very close to you and you personally, because you lost a child. And you've written about that in a beautiful book named Jerónimo. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes,
and you shared with me earlier and shared with me, when speaking about resilience, that basically your resilience started when Jerónimo passed. So you share when he died, he was 10 months old and he had Down syndrome. And, I cannot imagine the sadness or the pain that you must have felt, in that period. I know it's difficult, but could you try to talk a little bit about how that gave you resilience?
Yes, Aldo. I think the situation that we experienced like a family started when I had a boy. I had Jerónimo in Spanish. He was my second boy. I had already one. And when I realized that something was happening, my father is a medical doctor, and he was the pediatrician of Jerónimo, and he cannot at that time find the words to tell me that my baby was not doing well. At the beginning, he has to be in an incubator on the clinic, at the hospital, and apparently he has some problems to breathe, but after a while he was okay. We take him with us to the home, and I started to feel the difference between my previous kid, because probably if he was the first one, I didn't notice that something was happening. He was very slow because I feed him with the milk. And I was feeling that he cannot do it in an easy way. And finally I talked to my father, and he says, I know that something is happening. If you don't tell me what's happening, I will find another doctor. And my father was crying. He was a very successful medical doctor, a pediatrician, as I told, very successful in my city, in the south part of Ecuador. And he told me, I don't know how to say to you that Jerónimo is a Down syndrome kid. And it was a very hard situation. Remember that it was at the beginning of the 80s. At that time, most of the families, when they have a kid, at least in Ecuador and in some countries, it was like something not to show, not to talk about. But at the beginning, I make the question, why it's happening to me? Why it's happening to my family? But I think after a while, maybe 1 day, 2 days, I start to ask, why not to me? Because it happens in many families around the world. And probably we are prepared to receive Geronimo at home. And we start to build our lives around Geronimo, and to provide him with all the support and the tenderness, and finding that he will be happy forever, because Down syndrome, they are smiling kids, they are happy unless you hurt them. And I feel, okay, probably when I feel what I want for my kids, for my sons and a girl that I have, I want them to be happy. But with Geronimo, I learned that he will be always happy with us, with some limitations, but also with the bright of smiling face and the tenderness. And I said we can build a home around him. But suddenly, after some months, he started to feel bad. We consult not only to my father, but other doctors, and he had cardio problem, but he had problem with the lungs, with other parts of his body, and they cannot do anything. Little by little, he was losing life. And finally, when he was 10 months old, he passed away. I feel that my life was going to an end. I was feeling that I cannot support the amount of suffering that I had. But at the same time, I had a boy, and I was pregnant of my third children. I was pregnant of Manuela, and I say, well, I have to live for them also, and also for us. And I found a way to put, like in a cathartic book, all my feelings, and I wrote the book Geronimo, feeling that I can help others, especially parents of young kids, Down syndrome kids, to understand what's the meaning of having such a wonderful gift that a Down syndrome kid is, because for me it was a gift. And at the beginning I asked my family to read it. Some of them, especially my parents, they were so happy that I could write it. Some other people that doesn't understand why I have to publish something that was so personal, but I insisted to get published this book because I feel that it can help. And through the years, I feel that it helps a lot of families. And I wrote a second book that is called Other Geronimos, because I get to know other stories of families and kids with Down syndrome or paralysis or other situations. And I feel that I can describe the feelings, because it's a book not about science. It's only about feelings of love, of tenderness, of hope, even with the bad situations that we can have. I think it's the biggest challenge that I have in life, and these situations make me strong. And why I say that, because every time that I have some complication in my life, some situation or personal or like head of state, I compare it with losing a baby, and I said, okay, things are going to be okay. We are working on the solutions, and it makes me give me the sense of strong, of possibility to help others that I always feel, even now, after all these years that passed, and I feel the same.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rosalia. And it takes a certain type of strength and courage to go out there and share such enormous grief and sadness with the world, and basically turning it into something powerful that can help others, right? And I think that's such a enormous quality that speaks to you, that speaks to the foundation of who you are, but also to your resilient character. And I think it's enormous. I've had the pleasure of reading Geronimo, and it's such a personal book. It's drowned in your sadness, but at the same time, you're also letting go of him, through the book. You're talking about, how close he is to you, but also that in a way he needs to move on, right? And you know, when I, you know, read it as a father now of a 2-year-old, of course it breaks my heart 15 times over that, you know, such sadness exists, but it does. And again, thank you for showing so many parents or people who might cope with something similar, showing them the way by writing it down and sharing that emotion. And two things. One thing is, and you already hinted towards it, that the resilience you basically gained from losing Geronimo, that show of character that came back when you suffered a coup d'etat in 1997 when you were head of state of Ecuador. That must be a completely different situation, I can imagine. But could you tell me where you felt it was similar?
Well, I get involved in politics. I was councilwoman, and after that, delegate of cultural affairs in the part of the territory that I used to live in, Cuenca, and in my province. And after I accepted to be Undersecretary of Culture and Minister, and suddenly I developed to be a visible person in the political arena of my country. And I received invitation to be candidate for Vice President of the Republic in 1996. I accepted. It was not for sure that we were going to win, because the person that was the candidate was candidate for 2 times, and he always lose the elections. But at the 3rd time, with me in the formula, we won. And I didn't accept to be part of his political party. I create a political movement. Most of them were women and teachers. Many people thought at that time that it was a female political party, but it was not really like that, because we had several men. But most of the leaders were women. And I accepted to make an agreement, and we won the elections. It was 97 when we won in 96, but in 97 it started a really bad situation. The character of the president was really making a lot of noise, I said, to the political arena in Ecuador. And the Congress at that time, the parliament, decided to take him away from the position of president. It was a lot of people of the streets protesting against him and asking that he leave the position. And he finally left not only the position but also the country, because he had problems with corruption and other situations. Well, in a presidential state, when a person ran for vice president, we know that if there is something that happens with the president, we have to assume the presidency. And I did that after he was separated by the Congress. And it was machismo, a terrible machismo. They decided that the president of the Congress has to be the president of the Republic. They broke the Constitution, the law. I didn't accept that. And finally, they accepted that I can be the president of the Republic, but only for a few days. Imagine that. We had a terrible situation in the state. In 95, we had a war with Peru, and it seems that we will have another war in the internal crisis that we were living. Generals of the army talking with me, and other politicians also. I used to write when I feel that I am overwhelmed with all what's happening. And I wrote a book about the situation that I live. It's called The President, the Kidnapped of a Protest, because the protest was against the president. At that time, I was very popular. I feel that if at that time we had social network, it will be impossible for the assembly, for the parliament to make the coup d'etat, because the people, they were supporting me. Finally, it was evident that the machismo, not only on the parliament, but also on the army, because when you are head of state, you are the general of the army, you command the army, and for them, it was impossible that a woman can lead the army of a country. And it was a combination of situation between the position of the parliament and the position of the army. and I really suffered that coup d'etat. When I go back and feel what was happening at that time, I was thinking that I could maintain myself like president, but accepting the conditions that the parliament tried to put on me. The conditions were giving them money or presence in the ministers, in the different positions in the government. And I'm happy that I never accepted that I never accepted the possibility to make an agreement, not visible for the people, like secret agreements. I don't act like that. And my position like woman, it was really hard at that time. And I feel that even now, it's not easy for a woman to fight in the political arena or even in other fields. But at that time, I'm talking at the end of the last century, it was much harder here in Latin America and in Ecuador. Then, well, I was vice president. I was president of the Republic. I suffered a coup d'etat. It has to happen more than 20 years after these events, and they finally put my portrait on the gallery of the former presidents of Ecuador after almost 20 years that it happens. And it never happens with a man, because in Ecuador we had a lot of coup d'etats and situations, and they usually recognize immediately the situation. But in my case, it happens after 20 years.
How did that make you feel when your portrait was kind of included in that gallery?
It was fantastic, because I didn't know that. It was a friend from, because I knew that a group of women were protesting about this discrimination against me. I didn't say put my portrait there, but groups of women starting to send letters to the president. And finally, he decided that it was justice. They have to do that. But I didn't know when it happens. And because it was not a ceremony, they just put it on the wall. But some person that came from Argentina visited the palace in Quito, and he sent me a picture. He didn't know about all these antecedents. He sent me a picture, and I saw, oh, my portrait is there. And I took it with my sister and some other person, and this friend of us put on Facebook and put the portrait of Rosalia is on the palace. And it was an amazing movement of the press and the people saying, finally, it was done. Well, and I received an invitation, of course, to go to the palace with my family and see how it was. And it was really amazing, because it was all male on the walls, and I am still now the only one female in this position. It's going to be different in the future, because since the next elections in 2025, because of law, it's going to be always or a president or a vice president female in Ecuador, because of law.
Oh, wow. That's a very good law that they've adopted. Yeah. So that's definitely progress. Yeah. Yeah,
the parity, not only for the parliament of other positions, but also if you elect, and you have the formulas for the election has to be always a man and a woman, or a woman and a man. It is by law. Then I'm not going to be alone in this portrait gallery. I feel that it could be more and more women there.
And what would you advise women who, the future vice presidents, female vice presidents, or future female presidents of Ecuador, if you could convey to them one thing, what would that be?
Yes, I advise young leaders, because I talk a lot with women leaders, and I say, why you want to be in politics? And the advice is make the difference, because we had such an amount of problems, especially with corruption in our countries, that I feel women can make the difference. But only if we want, and we have to get prepared for that. Then make the difference is the advice that I always say to women in politics. Make the difference, in a good way, of course.
Yeah, that's great advice, and make the difference in whichever way you can, right? Make sure your voice is heard. And yeah, that's wonderful. the third challenge that you've basically defined is more like a strategy to overcome challenges. You mentioned, of course, 2 previous ones that you encountered. And as a third challenge, you basically said that in both cases, what helped me to overcome was to write. And you mentioned it. You mentioned the books you wrote from, the challenges you encountered. But what is it with writing that helps you overcome something? Which click do you make when you write?
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, and probably you and all the people that are hearing this podcast, we remember that when we have a problem and we share the problem with others, only saying to the good friend, saying, oh my God, that's happening with me, I have this situation, you feel that it helps you to feel better. Then, in my case, writing makes me feel better always. Even with the problems or situations that makes me laugh, because sometimes I write, and especially now I am writing for kids, probably because I have 7 grandkids and I feel that I want to write for them. But I put my dreams and I put circumstances and probably some things that I want to share with this possibility to write. But I always ask, and especially now that we have this pandemic situation of COVID-19, I feel that the second pandemic is going to be mental health, because people is afraid. People had been stuck on home, sometimes in small spaces, and having contacts sometimes that they can be not nice for people, especially for women. And I said, why not try to write like a therapy? Not thinking about publishing it. Probably in the future you can do and work more on it and make it more for that. But write for you, for yourself. How we can handle really tough situations. Maybe if you put in writing, handwriting, maybe more, because handwriting has a connection with neurons, and you can feel like an extension of your handwriting, maybe not a book, but some phrases, some thoughts. It can help you to interiorize it or maybe to find a solution. Because if you write a problem, maybe you read it and say, why I didn't think of that? Why I didn't think of this situation can change, or how we can ask others to be part of the solution. But maybe writing could be a good advice. And I ask also when you have situations in family or troubles with your students, write. And maybe writing makes you more wise and with the possibility to solve the problems.
Nice. That's wonderful advice, and advice I've definitely followed and that I'm doing, because it allows me to take a little bit of distance of myself, of my own mental state. I can look at myself as another person, whereas if it just is spooking in my head, I don't really know kind of where to put it. I think writing is definitely the way to go.
And maybe, Aldo, let me put a second step. After write, stop for a while and then take it and read aloud.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Why? Because you take the distance better when you read what you write and say it aloud, and you feel maybe this problem was not so big as I was feeling. Yeah. Or maybe I get a solution in the other situation. It could work, at least in some situations.
Yeah. No, definitely. So that's very good advice. Thank you so much, Rosalia. I will definitely try that next time. Write it down, leave it for a few days, and then read it back to yourself aloud. I'm going to give that a go. Rosalia, we're almost at the end of this interview. Thank you so much for taking all this time for Teach Pitch and for this podcast to talk to us. I always end each interview with 2 last questions. And the first one is, who more do you think we should be talking to about challenges? Who do you feel Teach Pitch or myself we should reach out to have a conversation with, just like we're having with you, to, someone you admire for challenges they have encountered and that you feel that, these challenges are worth sharing with our audience?
Well, it's not so easy because I met a lot of people maybe one of the persons that I admire really is the creator of the new Library of Alexandria, Ismail Serejeldin. He will be an amazing personality to interview. I remember when it was the Arab Spring, and it was some really very hard situation in the different cities of Egypt, and there were people surrounding the library, and he was afraid about what could happen with the library, because in such kind of situations anything could happen. I think he could be a great personality to interview. Or people that are writers. I think one of the writers that I already interviewed her for my TV show is Isabel Allende, the great Chilean writer. That's fantastic to talk, because she is so vibrant and she has to suffer exile and things like that. Well, there are many people that you can interview and had some very vibrant conversations about life and challenges and situations.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, and thank you for suggesting these people. Be careful what you wish for, because we might ask you to introduce us to these people. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't want to impose. It's just also to check who you admire and who you want to, who you feel is worthy of an interview. But I'm very happy to hear you.
I will tell my father, but he doesn't speak English. Then you can interview him. The person that I feel, and we had this last Sunday, Father's Day, and I wrote about him because I feel that he had good back for the kids, helping.
Okay, yeah.
That's fantastic.
We'd love to talk to him as well. With a good interpreter, there's nothing that cannot be done. And then the very last question, Rosalia, that's about reading, because we've spoken about writing, but I'm always curious to know from my guests, what are they reading at the moment, or is there any reading that they could recommend to our audience?
Well, it depends what I'm doing, because sometimes I move it by literature. I love to read novels or historic novels or biographies. I love biographies. But one of my favorite authors from ever is Margarita Yourcenar, a Belgian one, with Memories about Adriano. That is fantastic, and all her books. But also I read a lot about environmental issues, or sometimes some books like Freakonomics, for example, that give some tips about what will happen in the future and makes you have a lot of hope also in terms of finding the solutions with the science. I love to talk about science. And, now I am reading a book about migration that we are going to publish. It's not my author, but I asked some other people to write because we have a program about migrations. Or I am reading some books of Sonia Martinez. She is an author, a scientist that is writing books for kids to understand science. This is fantastic. Then I found such an amount of interest, of fields of interest, that sometimes I'm with environment, with economics, with education, with literature. Sometimes I read books for kids because I'm writing for kids also, and I want to know how other authors are writing, and it's fantastic. The situation is, read what you want. It doesn't matter what kind of book you are reading, but if it conducts you to create a habit about reading, it will be good. When you are a very young one and you want to read a small with a lot of pictures, it is nice. But after you are going to increase your level of understanding, of your level of interest in different fields, and you can read about everything. But for me, reading and writing it has been a big issue in my life. Since I was a kid, I started to read, and I never stopped. Because I feel that my horizons are wide, that I know situations and people and get knowledge, but most of all, I get entertaining. I enjoyed it a lot.
That is amazing, and thank you so much for sharing all your ideas, from reading to kind of sharing your life stories, sharing your energy and your spirit with our audience. It's been a true honor having you as a guest for our podcast interview, Rosalia. Thank you so much for doing this. I could talk with you for hours, but I'm aware that that's not how long this podcast can reach. But you're always welcome to come back. I hope to interview as well when you're Secretary General of the United Nations. Fingers crossed for that one. And I thank you on behalf of loads of people who want to change the world for the better, for being on the forefront and for showing us the way on how to do it. Rosalia Arteaga, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aldo, and thank you to everybody that's listening to this podcast. Thank you a lot.
If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.